Please give us some context about this move and what it could mean moving forward.
Well, Liz, the committee added to its athlete safety policy Monday a section that will ban transgender women from competing in women's sporting events. Now, the policy states, quote, the USOPC will continue to collaborate with various stakeholders to ensure that women have a fair and safe competition environment consistent with Executive Order 14201. Now, the rule doesn't mention transgender athletes explicitly, but it does reference compliance with the executive order signed by President Trump called, quote, keeping men out of women's sports, which was also aimed at changing rules around athletes who are transgender. Now, the International Olympic Committee's framework from 2021 states the need to ensure everyone can practice sport in a safe, harassment-free environment that respects their needs and identities, but places the final authority for decisions on transgender athletes with the international and national sport governing bodies.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So as we know, USOPC updated their policy, and it is essentially forcing all the governing bodies underneath that umbrella to abide by Trump's executive order. Volleyball in particular has been in the spotlight after the whole San Jose State University ordeal, where they had a male volleyball player competing on a women's team. And we know that that resulted in multiple boycotts from various teams within the Mountain West Conference. So it's very important that USA Volleyball comply with these new changes. So USAV released its new gender competition policy, and it says USAV athlete members are expected to participate or compete in all USAV sanctioned events or activities as a member of the gender assigned at the time of birth on their birth certificate. And when we hear birth certificates mentioned, we know that there's a problem with that. They didn't have to say, as mentioned on your birth certificate. They didn't have to say that. But they chose to include a birth certificate as a qualifying factor because they're well aware that birth certificates can be changed. The policy not only conflicts with the executive order, because you can alter your birth certificate in most states, but it violates the purpose of the entire effort. Now, at this stage, we can only take these sporting bodies seriously when they state that one has to be female, and that in order to determine that, all athletes have to undergo a cheek swab to prove their eligibility for the female category. At that point, we can take them seriously. Other than that, we know they're just trying to do the bare minimum. USA Volleyball does not even acknowledge that sex exists, opting for the Orwellian sex-assigned birth narrative. Their gender competition policy treats a foundational component of humanity as if it is as arbitrary as your favorite color. To them, gender is just an F or M blindly assigned on a document. The policy even says athletes can change their profile gender at any time, though that will not necessarily change their eligibility status. So clearly, this is still upholding the concept of gender identity and competing in volleyball based on that, rather based on biological sex. And apparently, if you go on their website, there's a lot of propaganda on there. They're promoting a documentary where a child changes his birth certificate. And they also have links to GLAAD, the Trevor Project, and the Gender Spectrum. So they've made their beliefs and priorities very, very clear. And this article goes on to say, they are dead set on doing the least they are legally required for their female athletes, who, by the way, are constantly shattering attendance and viewership records and bringing women's athletics to new heights. So this was written by Macy Petty, and she is calling out USA Volleyball. She's calling them out for their anti-woman agenda. She said, I had to play against a male athlete while playing under USA Volleyball in high school. It was during the heat of my recruiting process. So the embarrassing display of contrast between our skill could have knocked me out of my scholarship entirely. The physical dangers here are obvious too, as he was playing on a net 7 inches shorter than the men's net, with his dominant physical advantages. From that day on, I began petitioning for reform in women's sports that safeguards sex-based protections. It has been over 6 years, and it is shameful both that women have been ignored and that it required the presidential pen to get any kind of response. She said this is the core of the modern women's rights movement. This is what USAV is missing. As long as they deny the reality of sex, they will deny us the dignity we deserve. So the executive order was obviously to prevent male athletes competing in women's sports, but also to acknowledge that as a country, we acknowledge the fact that there are only two sexes. And USAV are incapable of acknowledging that, despite the science making that unequivocally clear. She said, unfortunately for them, female athletes like me are in it for the long haul. We will continue to appeal until we see our governing bodies truly championing female athletes. We deserve as much. Then she spoke about Congressman Greg Steube's Protection of Women in Olympic and Amateur Sports Act, which is very important that these acts actually pass, because that will ensure that it's written into law, that these sporting bodies abide by the executive order. And then she said that we need an overhaul of USA Volleyball's woke leadership. I mean, that really explains it, why they're so determined as an organization to push this lie and to push this injustice against women and girls. We saw what happened at San Jose State University, the woke coach whose priority was the male athlete, and the girls were left to feel like nobody was out looking for their interests. But thankfully they had Coach Melissa Beatty-Smoos, but she ended up losing her job. So clearly the leadership does need to be overhauled. There's a lot of people in positions of power who are determined to keep this going and are giving women the bare minimum, while also insulting our intelligence and leaving the door open for these male athletes in the women's category. She said, we will not stop fighting until fairness and women's dignity are restored for female sports at every level. And we know that it's not just an issue of fairness, it's also an issue of dignity and respect, because we can't have women being forced to share locker rooms with male athletes, hotel rooms, accommodation with male athletes. So the changes in policy by USOPC is a step in the right direction, and it is forcing these governing bodies to do the right thing. However, there are some who are determined to resist it at every level, and it is not going unnoticed. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.